Please stay tuned now for the CMix Radio Magazine on CMix Radio in Vancouver.
Welcome to the CMix Radio Magazine, a program of news, sports, space science, and more. Here is your host, Mike Stanley.
Welcome to this week's edition of the CMix Radio Magazine, episode number 7, and we have some a lot of things on here. Our repeats, because we're sort of winding down for the holiday season. We're getting our holiday program going. This week we've got something on the News Watch from Belay, and then we'll go to Exploring Space, and we'll talk about the future of manned space flight. And that'll be followed by an old Speaking of Sports segment about a 10-team CFL. It should be pretty interesting. Then we go to Chapter 7, Our City on the Air. We'll talk about CFMI FM 101, which is quite a different station now than when it was when I first heard it. Then we'll go from there. We will go to the Musings column. And number 7, we talked about from TV to computer. And my transition from using my computer, using my old TV, which pretty well died out, and we had turned it into a computer. So we're watching our TV on the computer these days. Kind of interesting way to do things. And then an old creative room segment to round out the program. So let's get the show underway with a dated Newswatch segment. We're going to do some new ones in the new year. These are getting kind of old, but we're pretty busy these days. So here's the Newswatch, our segment offering this week on bullying as part of the CMix Radio Magazine.
This is the Newswatch.
When you're only 9 years old and the target of taunts and sometimes physical abuse, it's no picnic. And that's why a 9-year-old grade 4 student from the 9 BC is doing something about it. Avena Little Wolfier started a Facebook page to educate others about the problems of bullying in schools. She told the CBC recently that she didn't like going to school because other kids hurt her so much. It got to the point where one rude kid asked her if she was pregnant. Others made fun of the weight, and it got to the point where she stopped eating or going to school. The story goes on to say that she began seeing a therapist, and that's when things began to improve. And she started a Facebook group called Team Avena, where she received several likes and thousands of messages of support. To say she's well on the road to recovery is good news, and will give her strength as she grows up. I'm not an historian, but I guess that bullying has been around longer than gin and tonic. All kidding aside, bullying takes many forms, from simple name-calling to malicious taunts. Sometimes those taunts get so personal that they can dig deep into a victim's psyche. Sometimes the abuse gets so close to the bone that, in some cases, they just can't stand it anymore, and they take a course of action that so many do, leaving family members and other loved ones to suffer the anguish of their loss. Too many people use the old cliche that it's a free country. You can say whatever you want. No, it isn't. You're free to make non-attacking jokes, but if your intent is to harm someone personally, it's as good as an assault, and in some cases should be treated like an assault. Cyberbullying, which is online attacks, stalking, and other forms of abuse online, is a new weapon, but there really should be tougher laws against this kind of assault. Victims are doing harm to themselves, and in some cases taking their own lives, all because someone else thought it would be cool to bug the kid in row 3 or the one with the thick glasses. Teachers, principals, and other school officials must educate kids and teach them that bullying of any kind will not be tolerated. If not, we'll have a society full of people who think it's okay to do injustice to others, and that's an even worse crime against the human species.
The Newswatch is a CMix Media production. Thank you for tuning in.
This is Exploring Space, a feature on space-related topics.
Welcome to this week's edition of Exploring Space, and we got some interesting stuff for you on this one. On this one, we're going to replay the audio track of a video which we found on YouTube about spaceflight in the future. I think you'll find it interesting. It's narrated by Mr. Stephen Hawking, who's best known as a physicist, a scientist. He's internationally renowned, and he's written several books on spaceflight, and on space, planets, and whatever else, anything to do with space. And you'll enjoy this. It's called Rocket into the Future, talking about the future of spaceflight. Stephen Hawking on this week's edition of Exploring Space.
The fastest manned vehicle in history was Apollo 10. It reached 25,000 miles per hour. But to travel in time, we'll have to go more than 2,000 times faster. And to do that, we'd need a much bigger ship. A truly enormous machine. The ship would have to be big to carry a huge amount of fuel, enough to accelerate it to nearly the speed of light. Getting to just beneath the cosmic speed limit would require 6 whole years at full power. Passing our closest star system, Alpha Centauri. Around 30 trillion miles away from Earth, and 4 years since launch, the ship begins to travel in time. For every hour of time on the ship, 2 hours pass on Earth. A similar situation to the spaceship that orbited the massive black hole. But there's more to come. After another 2 years of full thrust, the ship would reach its top speed
real wonder of our journey is that it reveals just how strange the universe is. It's a universe where time runs at different rates, in different places, where the most extreme objects imaginable, giant black holes, twist and warp both time and space. It's a place where tiny wormholes exist all around us. And where ultimately, if we could develop the right technology, we could use our understanding of the laws of physics to become time voyagers through the fourth dimension.
Wow, that was quite interesting, wasn't it? I don't think we're going to ever have planes flying at the speed of light, because the reality is that we can't fly at the speed of light, or we'd all be very, very dead. That's this week's edition of Exploring Space, and I hope you enjoy it. Stephen Hawking narrating that video about the future of spaceflight.
Exploring Space is a C-Mix Media production.
You are listening to the C-Mix Radio Magazine, a weekly features program.
Hope you enjoyed that segment on the future of manned spaceflight. Pretty interesting what we'll be doing in years to come. I'm looking forward to that. Hope I'm around when the man lands on Mars. We want to see that day come. Well, I live long enough to see that. And we had a segment on bullying. It's not just for one day of the year. It's pretty well something you have to think about every day. Bullying has been around for a long time. So anyway, things about bullying. It's an interesting story about the lady in Nanaimo, BC. I'm trying to get a Facebook page going to get some support. She says quite a bit so far, and that's good. Moving along in the program, we have something from Our City on the Air, Chapter 7, talking about CFMI. But in the meantime, here's something a little dated, but certainly fitting for this time of year. Since we're into playoffs in CFL, a 10-team CFL on Speaking of Sports, part of the C-Mix Radio Magazine.
This is Speaking of Sports, a feature of C-Mix Radio Sports.
I've been thinking about this for some time now, and if I was the CFL commissioner for a day, I'd have a 10-team league, or even a 12-team league. Let's face it, a 9-team league doesn't make a damn bit of sense. If you go to a dance, there's always two people dancing. No one dances alone, so why wouldn't a 9-team team get smart and add a 10th team? A bit more revenue would be generated, and if there was a 10th team, the weaker teams could only get stronger, and if they needed help, there would be more money around to help them out. Besides, that extra money could be spent to finance better stadiums, thereby building a stronger league with more competitive teams. And the TV people would love the increased ratings. At present, there's talk of adding a 10th team, perhaps in Quebec, or maybe in the Maritimes. Wherever it is, it can do nothing but good for an old league like the CFL. Come on, Mark, 10 teams makes more sense. The NFL is thinking of expanding to 32 teams, so why not 10 in the CFL? I think it'd be a great idea.
Speaking of Sports is a C-Mix Media production.
welcome to Our City on the Air, a 10-part program about Vancouver's radio history. This is Chapter 7.
In this edition, we'll begin focusing on stations on the FM side of the dial. This week, we'll feature CFMI. On May the 16th, 1968, Radio & W Limited, owner of CKNW, was granted approval to establish a new FM station in New Westminster, 101.1 MHz with effective radiated power of 100,000 watts and the antenna height of 709 feet. In 1970, Radio & W Limited launched CFMI FM on March 22nd of that year. The format was pop for adults, and the station was heavily automated with a Fat Albert system using stereo cartridges. CFMI's transmitter was located on Mount Seymour, and the studios and offices were at 815 McBride Plaza in New Westminster. Through the 1970s, the station was mostly adult-oriented rock and light rock, but in the late 1970s, the station experimented with disco and eventually evolved into a hard rock format, but abandoned that experiment for a more middle-of-the-road rock format. By 1987, CFMI was given approval to decrease effective radiated power from 40,000 to 35,000 watts and to relocate the transmitter site slightly to the east on Mount Seymour. On January the 15th, 1996, CFMI and CKNW moved to new studios in the TD Tower in downtown Vancouver. They'd been situated at the McBride Plaza since the early 1970s. In 1998, the Griffiths family holdings in Western International Communications Limited were sold, subject to CRTC approval, to Shaw Communications Incorporated and CamWest Global Communications Corporation. In 1999, following months of negotiation, agreements were filed with the CRTC in the split of WIC assets between CamWest Global, Chorus Radio Company, formerly Shaw Radio, and Shaw Communications. On October the 18th, CFMI was given approval to operate a transitional digital radio undertaking. The transmitters would be installed on Mount Seymour and at the Metrotown Cantel building in Burnaby, and would employ the Eureka 147 digital audio broadcasting system. The station would transmit on 1,461,536 MHz with an effective isotropic radiated power of 3,381 watts from Mount Seymour and 2,774 watts from Burnaby. By 2000, following an April hearing in Vancouver, and in July, the CRTC announced the approval of the purchase of WIC Radio by Chorus Radio Company, which launched CFMI Vancouver. On June 19th of that year, CFMI was authorized to add a rebroadcast transmitter at Whistler operating at 90.7 MHz and 50 watts. In other words, the broadcast power decreased, but the station continued to broadcast to a wide audience. By 2003, CFMI had evolved into one of the top classic rock stations in BC. Rock 101 has since continued to grow and become more popular, and there will be more new stations on the FM side of the dial offering a wide variety of musical formats, and even foreign language stations. In the next segment, we'll go hunting for the fox.
Our City on the Air is a feature of this station. Tune in next week for more interesting stories about Vancouver's radio history.
You are listening to the C-Mix Radio Magazine, a weekly features program.
Welcome back to the program, and in this segment we've got our segments on the Creative Room, number 7, and Musings, number 7. We talk about the transition from TV to a computer, since TV died out and we're using a computer as a TV. And I think it's the way of the future anyway. TVs are going to go out the window anyway. Well, maybe they will in some cases, but certainly the TV is becoming a thing of the past. As computers are becoming advanced enough that you can use it as a TV, and that's what's happening in the future. Anyway, we'll have that, and the Creative Room, a little bit dated one anyway, but we'll use it. Hope you enjoy it. So it's C-Mix Radio Magazine.
Stanley's Musings, a commentary feature of C-Mix Radio.
If there's one thing that throws me off a bit, it's when I have to do without a certain important item for a time. Halloween came and went, and so did my TV of 12 years. I don't have the millions to get a new one, but I just finished paying off a large debt. So I'm hoping to celebrate with Shelley, but that'll have to be put on hold while I look for another ways to fill my void. One idea I have is to get a TV card installed into my computer so I can watch the shows on my computer. Heck, I listen to the news on the computer. I do just about everything else on it as well. Why not use it to watch my favorite shows? I watch YouTube a lot, and some classic TV shows like Mr. Ed, and it's likely that the computer will become my home entertainment system. I like that. No more stereos, bulky old TVs, no radios, just one item that'll fulfill all of my audio and video needs. Although I'm a little melancholy about not getting to watch the news tonight or next Canucks game, I will have a computer's video capacities to see me right until I move into the new era of home entertainment.
Stanley's Musings is a C-Mix Media production.
Welcome to the Creative Room, a place where creativity lives. Open that door and step inside the Creative Room.
Mondays are hard days to trust, and today was no exception. The clock read 7:27. Just seeing that time made me wish I could just sleep in just a little bit longer, but instead, I decided to get up and go through the usual routine of showering, eating breakfast, brushing teeth, and making sure that the lunch was in its bag and in the back sack. Everything was done by 8:45, but I still wish I could just lay down and sleep more. Once outside, I noticed the chill in the air, but there was no turning back. At first, I walked slowly, but within minutes I noticed that the pace of the walking had become faster as I approached the hill. I was focusing on the climb and dwelling on what might happen this morning. I was too caught up in the thoughts to make stock of what was going on around me. Sure, it was nice and all of that, but there were things to be done on the computer, and there were plans to be made about future study. That all changed once I climbed the hill and set foot on the grass running track. I was transformed in my mind to the runner wishing to run the mile. I wished I could just strip off the back sack and run down the inside lane, but something within me told me that I was now 42, not 24. It also reminded me that I was at least 70 pounds heavier than I was when I last ran the mile at a track meet in Richmond in 1979. On top of that, I was 5 minutes late for the first class of the day, and that did it. I forgot about the skinny miler I used to be, and jogged down the inside lane towards the school. After just 20 measly meters, I gave up and walked the rest of the way to the school. Once inside the classroom, I could see from the clock on the wall that I was 20 minutes later than I expected to be. And something inside me said I should have stayed in bed. But no, I still can't trust Mondays yet, but maybe I still can't trust myself enough to do things right on the first day of the week.
This is the Creative Room on C-Mix Radio.
Rabbits. Okay, Easter's been over and done with for more than 2 months now, and we're entering yet another month. June has always meant the beginning of the end of the school year, sports days, outings, and of course, that dreaded exam time for the senior grades. At this point in my life, I think about things like that. or shall I say, reflect on those times. And though I enjoy my life these days, I remember what it was like getting out of school and heading down to the local running track and readying myself for yet another summer of track meets and parties. I can't recall exactly if the track meets or the weekend parties meant more. One thing I do know is that they were both a blast. I met more girls in those days. There was none of this status thing going on. If you were somebody, you were in, and even if you weren't, you had a place in the overall scheme of things. Yes, June also signals the melting away of spring into that hottest and most fun of times, summer. I'm getting too busy to bother with these little things like sports days and beach parties, but oh, how I wish I was only 20 years old again. Girlfriends, track meets, and those wild parties. Yes, sometimes they got a little out of hand, but for the most part, they were the essence of what youthful summers were meant to be. As for those rabbits, well, they were only for good luck.
This is The Creative Room on C-Mix Radio.
This essay is about a picture of a road, but it was chosen to give you something to think about. I'm holding the photograph, which I took a couple of summers ago while on one of my picture-taking expeditions. You travel it many times, and most likely you've done some pondering while you were on this road. That something might have been an event from your past, or it might have been some contemplation about future plans. Whichever it was, I thought a picture of a road would be fitting, because after all, this is the time of year when most of us begin to reflect upon the past as well as some plans for the future. The road wasn't loosely chosen, because whenever we think of our lives and the decisions we must make, the road is our metaphor. People are always asking where we hope to be 10 years down the road. When we travel, we say we are hitting the road. When we reflect, we look back down the road to see where we went wrong. No matter how many mistakes we've made in life, we can't go back and fill in the potholes. The best we can do is mentally return to the bad spots and patch them up so we can carry on with our journey. No point in brooding over missed curbs or burned out bridges. Look ahead and keep your eyes on the highway. We never seem to escape the connection. We are either going places or on the road to a better life, or we're on the highway to hell. Stay in one spot and you're on a dead-end road. People in control of their lives are said to be kings of the road. Yes, many songs and poems use this image, and whether we like it or not, we are stuck with it. Politicians love to talk about building new highways, because that's progress to them. It means jobs. It means tourists will use the new routes. But most of all, it means money, which means more votes come election time, or it can spell disaster for the road building regime. What it all comes down to is that life is indeed a highway, and we can stop and look back, make a mental note of the potholes, and hope to avoid them in the future. We can reflect on the wrong turns we made and read the signs more carefully before deciding which direction to go, or we can choose to continue down the blind alley. No one can know where it will end, but some believe it just goes on, even after you cross the unseen bridge. Yes, it's just a picture of a road, and I'm writing about it just to give you something to think about.
The Creative Room is a C-Mix media production.
You are listening to the C-Mix Radio Magazine, a weekly features program.
This is Creative Room for another week, episode number 7, and interesting stuff in there as always. And before that, we had our musings column on From TV to Computer, transition from a TV to a computer. Use the TV as a computer as a TV, whatever. TVs, like I said earlier on, are kind of going out the window. literally. Well, I mean, some of them are, but TV is becoming a thing of the past, and that's my take on things anyway. So we hope you enjoyed the program. This is the final episode of the CMix Radio Magazine until after Christmas, as we start to get ready for Christmas. Yeah, it's coming, it's flying at us like a comet. And it's not going to hit us, but anyway. But I hope you enjoyed this show, and we'll be back again after Christmas in the New Year as we start broadcasting again on January the 18th. So, hope you enjoyed the CMix Radio Magazine. We'll be back after Christmas. In the meantime, have a good time. And season's greetings. A little early to say Merry Christmas just now. We haven't even had the Grey Cup yet. So there you go. The magazine for another week. We'll be back after the holiday season. So long for now.
Our email address is cmixradioprograms@gmail.com. The address again is cmixradioprograms@gmail.com. Our web address is cmixradio.blogspot.ca. The address again is cmixradio.blogspot.ca. Join us next week for another edition of the CMix Radio Magazine. This program is a CMix Media production.
CMix Radio, the home of yesterday's music.